Welcome to Center of Light. Good to see you all tonight, today, depending where you are in the world. That's our goal. That's the aim. No shame, blame, no game. That's where you want to be. That's what you want to be. It's clear. Hello, COVID-19. See what unclarity has got us? How do you like yourself now? That's the goal. No matter how you slice that pie, no matter you walk, talk, creed, code, or sect, you want to become clear. My dear. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, Center of Light Radio. Homecoming, Crossing the Bridge to the Soul, new release. Where is it? That thing's right there, that gorgeous thing. August 1st, 2020. Coming out really soon. We're going to be doing a lot of pushing really hard this week and the week to come. Check out my new backdrop, y'all. Just playing around. Got nothing to do except create. You creators, you. Center of Light, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement. Strap in all my brother and sister astronauts as we launch for inner space. And we fall so far, we touch the Alchemist. Yeah, share the show everywhere. Be a part of what I do. Thank you for being here all these years. All these years? Only 4 years, but boy, a lot of fun, and it also goes by quick, paradoxically. Today, my guest is Colm Holland, and we're speaking about his best-selling book, The Secret of the Alchemist. Let's get right to it. I want to get him on the show. This is a very delightful gentleman. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Let's see. Let me get my notes. The Secret of the Alchemist. Colm Holland is a writer, mentor, speaker, alchemy trainer. Hello, y'all. An adventurer. He's a young man now. For the last 50 years, he says, I have been on my alchemist journey and am learning something new every day about how love, capital word, love, can turn the ordinary in our lives into gold. Once we find our treasure, it is vital that we give it away. I love him already. To be the benefit of our world. This is the true empowerment, and the path to the gold is personal transformation. One more second. I'm learning everything as I'm doing it right now. He says, join me as we make the journey together so that you can be the alchemist in your world. Everyone, I am posting links. Here's the bio to Colm, as well as links to his website. Go stomp all over his page and make a big noise. Let me see. Let's welcome to Center of Light Radio. Where is he? He's right there. Hello, brother.
Hey, Keith. Hi. Good to see you.
Welcome to Center of Light Radio, man. Thank you. I went the last 2 days. It takes hours to create stuff. Thank you for being here via Gavin Lee Davies, who is a dear brother of you and I both. Yeah.
Yep. No. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be on. I've been excited all day. I'm in the UK, so I've been getting excited all day for this. It's evening now, but I'm fresh and ready. Ready when you are, Keith.
One of the first questions I usually ask my guests is, how did you get into all this nonsense? What brought you onto this path, brother?
So I'm going to ignore the first 40 years of my life. Let's just pretend they didn't happen. Well, we'll come back to the first 40 years. I want to mention one event because it's the big milestone. So for anybody who's not read my bio yet, I'll just fill you in really briefly. I worked in publishing for 25 years. I was at HarperCollins Publishers, one of the biggest global publishers. I was in the Sydney office. I was doing really well in my career, and it was my job in that publishing company to read all the manuscripts of the books that we were going to publish that came from other parts of the world. And one of the piles of manuscripts that landed on my desk one day contained this book. I wonder how many of your readers have read this book, Keith. Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. But if I tell you that he was completely unknown, nobody had ever heard of this guy. We are talking 1993. It was so long ago, I was 40 years old, all right? So 1993, a manuscript by an unknown author called Paulo Coelho lands on my desk on a Friday afternoon, and I was really tired, and I was really looking forward to the weekend, but I looked at the cover of the book, and they say you should never judge a book by its cover. That was a rule we had in the business, of course, but the cover was amazing. It was purple. If you Google the original cover of The Alchemist. You'll see what I mean. It was purple. It has a shepherd boy on it, and this Arabian figure with the all-seeing eye of God on his forehead, and that did it. It was like, okay, I'm taking this book home. I threw it in my briefcase, jumped in the car, went home. On Sunday afternoon, I opened my briefcase because I remembered it was there, and I sat in my backyard in Sydney, Australia, in the middle of nowhere, and I read that book as if it was the first book I had ever read in my entire life. And that was, to answer your question, Keith, is how I got mixed up in all this stuff, because that book changed my life. I was lucky to be one of the very first people to ever read it in English. Paulo doesn't write in English. He writes in Portuguese. But I just knew in my backyard that afternoon that this book was going to be a global bestseller. Nobody had ever told me that. I'd never met Paulo. None of my colleagues mentioned that, but I just knew. Do you know how many copies this book has sold over the years? I'll tell you. It tells you on the back, actually. Over 85 million copies. It has been translated into 70 languages. There is only one other book that has ever outsold this book in terms of a living author. In other words, the author's still alive, and the only other book is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Now, what does The Alchemist and Harry Potter have in common? Alchemy. There you go. So something really important happened to me personally after I read that book. I rang my colleague in America and said, I want 20,000 copies of this book. And he said, are you drunk? He said, why? Because normally you only normally order like 2,000 or 3,000 copies for Australia. I said, no, I really want 20,000 copies. It's going to be mega. Cut a long story short, Paulo Coelho came to Australia in the first year of its publication, and he met me and he said, Colm, I want to give you a gift because you were the first person in the publishing company to really get the vision of what a mega bestseller this was going to be. And I'm so grateful. I want to give you something. And I just want to tell you that I was so shallow in my life at that point. I thought, well, so what's he going to give me? A gold Rolex or something, something that glitters, something that I can flash around, in the office and go, hey, look what Paulo Coelho got me. Look how good I am. No, he said, you know what? I asked God what I should give you. And I said, yeah. And he said, God told me I should spend a day of my life doing my alchemy magic just for you, Colm, so that the universe will be freed to give you whatever you want. It will come to pass. Ooh. And I kind of looked at him and he said, there's only one condition. You just need to decide what you want. So I thought, I was driving home with my wife. He took us out to a restaurant and I was driving home with my wife and I looked at my wife and I said, so what did you make of that? I said, and she said, it doesn't matter what I think, Colm, it's what you think. And I said, yeah, well, a gold Rolex would have been nice. And she said, I don't think that was I don't think that was the point of this evening, was it? Within 2 months of that evening, the two guys who were above me in the business, who kind of made my life quite difficult, were both promoted out of the business to even better jobs. And I, strangely enough, was promoted into a higher executive position, but it wasn't what I wanted. What I actually wanted was to start my own business. And so I went back to The Alchemist and I began to study The Alchemist again. And I really delved into it because I said, I want to know, what is the secret of Paulo's? What is it about this guy? What has he discovered? And what's he trying to tell us in this book? And I have to tell you, the more I studied it, more stuff began to happen. Within 2 years of that night with Paulo, I founded the largest digital advertising agency in Australia. We had 85 staff. We had some of the biggest clients. We did the Olympics 2000. I was making really good money. I was no longer working as a middle manager that I was really bored and fed up with in HarperCollins. And my life just went, wow, into this whole new dimension. But more importantly, I began to discover who I really was. There was something else going on inside me, and that's what I was discovering by reading The Alchemist. There was an inner transformation that was changing who I was to become more of who I should be, who I was born to be. And through that, I was actually manifesting that in a fulfilled life. So that's a relatively long answer to your short question. This is how I got
I
wound
deserve
up.
to hear every bit of that. So, do I dare ask you the question? You said, he's going to give you a gift via God telling him so. Go
Yeah,
spend a day with Colm, and he did. And
yeah.
how did he work his magic? Did he turn a little wand? Did he twinkle his nose? Did he just give you some gifts? Did he touch you in something? What did he do, if that's something you can share? I'm
Yeah,
curious.
so other than just look at me and say what he said, that's all that I personally experienced. But then in a couple of years later, he produced another book called The Valkyries. And if you've not read The Valkyries, if you've read The Alchemist and you want another book of Paulo's to read, I strongly recommend The Valkyries. It's a true story, and it's the story of the alchemy magic. It explains what kind of magic Paulo does on a regular basis and how he came into manifesting that magic. And he goes off into the Mojave Desert in Nevada, and he and his wife go into the desert, and supernatural stuff happens. I'm not going to spoil the story for you, because if you want to read that book, I highly recommend it. But within there, and within the book itself, so then when I read The Valkyries, I came back to The Alchemist, and towards the end, he actually describes in detail the kind of magic that he does. So what Paulo does is that he invokes, using the powers of the universe, using unconditional love at the very heart of all that is true in life. He invokes what you as an individual already know. So in the book, The Alchemist, he probably, if Paulo is a character in the book, he is the guy called The Alchemist. And maybe one of the things we might want to do during the session, actually, Keith, is to just briefly tell, for those who've not read The Alchemist, it's a fable. It's about a shepherd boy, but I can go into a bit more detail. There's 2 or 3 episodes in that book that I think your listeners would really benefit from me explaining. But yeah, so what Paulo did, what I discovered after, is that he spent on his own with the universe, invoking love, calling on love to enable me to deal with the things that were blocking the inner me from moving forward, and particularly who were blocking me from taking risks. You know, Keith, I know that life is all about taking risks. No pain, no gain. But the pain that most of us try and avoid is that pain of making the inner journey into the inner self, where we discover things that we just don't want to see. We certainly don't want other people to
And
see.
Colm, doesn't that journey require going into the pain, or through it rather, to actually touch the gold? We have to transform our own lead, that which weighs us down, into this beautiful gem, this beautiful jewel, this beautiful possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just talk about alchemy for a moment. So alchemy has been around for 5,000 years at least, as far as we know. It started in Egypt. It began in the Egyptian mythology of their god Thoth, and it's built around his teachings. This particular god, Egyptian god, apparently inscribed his knowledge in a thing called the Emerald Tablet. So anybody listening who's done any reading on the subject of alchemy will hear all about the Emerald Tablet. You'll also will have heard of the Philosopher's Stone, quite possibly. You've also heard of the elixir of life. The whole point of alchemy was the ability to utilize the central matter that is in everything, which they call prima materia. The ability to engineer that prima materia so that you could actually transmute, as they called it, something like lead into gold. But it's the process of turning lead into gold that's painful. So they used to add all symbology around it. So we think of alchemists in their laboratories. We think of alchemists sitting in their darkened, dungeons with Bunsen burners going and smells and bubbling things going on, doing wicked things of some description that you're not supposed to do. This was all just smoke and mirrors. It's just symbolism. What they were really doing was an inner spiritual transformation, because that's where the power. What they wanted to do was to change the outcome of real things in life. So to change the outcome of your own destiny, so that you're no longer living under the fear of fate, or living under the fear that somebody else is pulling the strings in your life. It's that empowerment. This is what the alchemists were really seeking, the empowerment to be in control of your world for one reason. And this is the key thing. The Emerald Tablet tells us what that reason has to be. So let me just quote it to you. I've learnt it off by heart. So it is true, very true, without any lying, and most certain, that which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the one only true miracle of the one only true thing. The one only true thing is unconditional love. If we can understand that that's what life is all about, then alchemy is a great set of metaphorical symbols that we can apply that can help us get there. And particularly that whole process that you described earlier of going within the pain. And in my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, I tell the story of my own alchemy journey, including all the pain, including all the bits that I probably really don't want you to know, but I've told you in the book anyway, just so I can encourage others to make that journey. And what I discovered is probably what most people are going to discover, is that hidden deep within the unconscious, hidden deep in those dark recesses of Dante's Inferno, for want of a better description, is a ton of pain caused by multiple wounds, of which we probably weren't responsible. And at some point I can tell you my own story of the wounds I discovered. But ultimately, the reason why life is quite often so difficult and so painful is that we've just tried to run away. We spend our lives running away from that pain and those wounds, when actually unconditional love and the universe is saying, we can heal this. We can do this together. We can actually heal those wounds if you're prepared to take the responsibility for your own healing. All the power of the universe will come to your aid. And that's my experience. That's the experience that's taught by the alchemists.
Colm, how does one begin to unconditionally love? Is it a way? I mean, we interchange words: unconditional love, source, creator, God, all that is good. But how does one actually put into practice unconditional love? Is it a doing of something? Is it a little bit of not doing, a little bit of both? What is that?
So you've really led me onto one of my hottest topics here. I can talk about unconditional love all day. So I talk about love with a capital L, because I've looked at all religions and I value all religions, all beliefs, as long as it is for the common good, as long as whatever we believe wants the best for humankind, then I'm in support. However, the names that we give to our gods, to our deities, to our belief system, whatever it is, quite often shuts other people out. So if I name it in one way, that's going to exclude you. And if you name it in another way, that might exclude somebody else. So I decided very early on in my life that I was going to call this supreme power, force, whatever it is that holds the universe, I was going to call it love. And there's a reason why I call it love, is because in my experience, it has personality. It has a character. And to describe that character, love is the best description I can give it. So let me explain what I mean by unconditional love. It's a love that accepts unconditionally everything that we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a love that never runs out of patience with us. It's a love that is totally forgiving. It's a love that is totally empowering. It is a love that never judges us, that never says you're not good enough, ever. And even if we decide that we're not good enough, and if we decide that we've failed, it doesn't matter how much we decide we've failed, unconditional love will never place that judgment on us. There is no failure with love. It's impossible to fail with love. The moment you think that, love's just going to embrace you and say, but yeah, I love that failure. I love that mistake that you just made. I love that fall that you just encountered, because all of the conditions that we put on ourselves are exactly that. We put them on ourselves. They are not put on us by any deity, by any power, by any force, external force. It is. And then what love wants to tell us is that if we're prepared to make that inner journey into the unconscious, into the soul, into the self, what we will discover, and what I discovered, I know, Keith, you and I have had this conversation, I know this is what you discovered as well, is that love lives at the very heart of who we are. That's who we are. We are unconditional love. We come from it. We are it now. And that's where we're going to go back to, some way, somehow, whatever that looks like. So why not allow unconditional love to embrace us in the here and now? And I actually made that decision when I was 18 years old. I was very, very fortunate that somebody offered me the chance to meet unconditional love at a young age. So that's been one of the key factors that probably led up to that evening with Paulo Coelho all those years later. That journey began when I was 18.
Everyone, Keith Anthony Blanchard here, Young Nova Center of Light Radio. Today we're speaking with Mr. Colm Holland. We're speaking about his book. He's speaking about his book, educating me as well on the secret of the alchemist. You know, I do a lot of this. In fact, Colm and I are the same guy in different continents across the pond. We call the same thing different things. And I'm just really digging your perspective, sir, and your approach and your application of how it works for you, and just watching you in your fire. Gavin, I saw a post from Gavin recently, and it said, this book is a have to in a lifetime kind of idea. Your book, The Secret of the Alchemist. He paraphrased, of course. He said, The Secret of the Alchemist is a lifetime read, and you have to at least read this once in your life. So that's pretty big kudos from someone who is a literary agent, publishing director, marketer. That's pretty doggone good.
Yes, no, Gavin is delightful. Love to Gavin. And I think the reason why he said that is because I think what I did in my book, what my aim of my book was to make myself completely vulnerable. I wanted to actually live out within the words of the book, the actual journey that I believe each of us can take. So when you read my book, you are kind of coming on my journey, but in a way that I encourage you to actually participate in that journey for yourself. Your journey is unique. It will never look like my journey. No two journeys are ever the same. No two snow crystals are ever the same. Same principle. So your journey and your encounter with unconditional love and where that takes you, well, what we call, Keith, the hero's journey, where that takes you will be completely unique. But there are certain principles that alchemy outlines that are really useful guideposts along the way. And I'd like to just mention some of those guideposts. And I want to do it, if I may, by just delving into the original book. Because
sure.
So this is my book, The Secret of the Alchemist. But it's really a companion novel to the original book, The Alchemist, as well. And the reason I did that was that I originally was just going to write about me. And I thought, as I began to write about me, I just kept referring back to the Alchemist, the Alchemist, the Alchemist. So I thought, this is ridiculous. I may as well write about the Alchemist and then talk about me and my life on the back of the Alchemist. So that's what I've done. That's what my book does. And I discovered, and I realized, I read all of the notes. I read Cliff's notes. I read all of the student notes. So many people have actually studied the book by Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, at school. And I wanted to see if there was anything in there that I could improve on. So I read all of the notes. I read everything there was on the subject. And I discovered that the secret that I had found in The Alchemist is never mentioned. And I'm thinking, why would that be? Why is it not mentioned? So I just want to tell you how I discovered the secret. I was in my office in Sydney one day and the phone rang. And who would be on the other end of the phone but a guy called Dr. Wayne Dyer?
Oh my gosh, that man has put me on my knees 4 or 5 times crying profusely when I watched his work. I love that guy.
Hi, Colm here. Hi, Colm. This is Dr. Wayne Dyer. Oh, hi. Wayne, hi. How you doing? Yeah, I'm doing well, Colm. There's something I need to ask you. I said, fire away. It's not every day you get a call from the guru himself. And sadly passed. Love that guy to death. And he said, there's something I need you to do. And I said, what's that? He said, I need you to do your alchemy that you did for Paulo Coelho on his book, The Alchemist, because this was after I published Paulo's book in Australia. He said, I need you to do in Australia what you did for Paulo Coelho's book. I need you to do your alchemy, and I'm relying on you to do that. Is that okay? And you don't argue with Dr. Wayne Dyer. You just say, amen, yes, whatever you want. His book was called Real Magic, so that's one of his latest. Fabulous book, highly recommend everybody read that. And I was in a kind of a state of shock. I put the phone down, and I had, at that point, I don't think I really nailed what is the real secret in the fable of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And the words of Wayne were just echoing and I had Paulo's book on my desk at the time, and I'm staring at the title. And what is the title? It's The Alchemist. And it was like, wake up, Colm, wake up. This book is actually about alchemy. It's more than just a story of a boy pursuing his dream and finding his treasure and taking risks and overcoming obstacles. Yeah, it is all of those things, and that's all part of it. But actually, there's something even deeper in this book. And then I went back and I reread it and read it again. And page after page, particularly once you get about halfway through, it becomes a manual on how to practice everyday alchemy. So I went back to the notes that all the high school kids have been using to study The Alchemist. And guess what? It's not there. They don't talk about alchemy, and yet it's the very essence. And this is what I love about alchemy. Alchemy has the ability to hide in plain sight. It's really good at it. In fact, when you talk to people about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and you say, oh, what do you know about J.K. Rowling? Oh, she wrote the Harry Potter series. Okay, do you know anything else about J.K. Rowling? Oh, she's one of the world's best-selling authors. Yeah, absolutely. But do you know anything else about what J.K. Rowling did before she wrote the Harry Potter series? No. She studied alchemy for 2 years. She studied the art of alchemy. So I thought alchemy was dead. I thought alchemy was something that, from centuries ago. I thought it was a completely defunct way of thinking about life. But the more I studied it, and the more I went into it, and the more I realized how Paulo has been using it, it's no shock to me now, looking back, that this book has sold more than 85 million copies, because he used alchemy, guys. Trust me. This is not just a great little story that happens to be really popular. There is something going on with the universe behind the scenes, and that's what I try and reveal in my book, The Secret of the Alchemist. So I've given the game away. I've already told you what the secret is, but the question is, are you prepared to apply that secret to your life? Because that is what is the game shifter. That was the game shifter for me. And it's not too late. I was 40 years old when I discovered this. So I was well down the track. But at some point, what I might do, Keith, if you think it's appropriate, I might just take people just briefly through the story, the original story of the Alchemist. Okay.
Let's go.
So now I'm talking about the original book. Many of you will have read it. So let me remind you. The central character is a guy called Santiago. He's a boy. We're not quite sure. We think he's a late teenager. His parents wanted him to be a priest, but he wanted to travel. So he became a shepherd because shepherds were traveling around the countryside. And he was in the countryside one night with his sheep, and he has a dream. But where he has the dream is really important. He has the dream in what's called an abandoned chapel. There's no roof left on the chapel. It's in the open air, and he can see the stars. And a sycamore tree is growing in the actual inside the chapel. It's been that destroyed. And this is where the beginning of the metaphors, the alchemical metaphors, begin. So the chapel is a symbol of the brokenness of his own soul. So his soul was actually asleep. It was derelict. It wasn't alive at all. So his own religious background had failed to fulfill the needs of his soul. And then within that brokenness of that soul, he has a dream. In the dream, a child comes to him and says, if you go overseas, if you go to North Africa, if you go to the place of the pyramids, you will discover a buried treasure. And it's a child, it's a female child. Metaphor number 2. I'll tell you about that in a second. Come with me, she says. And as he starts to follow her in the dream, he wakes up. So he never finds out where the treasure is. This happens 2 or 3 times, twice at least. So he's so taken by the fact that this recurring dream keeps coming back that he goes and visits, first of all, a horoscope lady, a gypsy, he calls it, who reads his horoscope. And she tells him exactly the same thing. You need to go to the pyramids to find your treasure. So what is this going to the pyramids? What does actually that stand for? Well, here's the next metaphor. It actually stands for the art of alchemy, because guess where alchemy began? At the base of the pyramids, even before the pyramids were built. And did you know that the sand in Egypt, around the pyramids, a lot of it's been gone now, is full of gold particles? That's where the Egyptians got their gold from. They used to mine it. So that is another metaphor for following the Arabian version of alchemy to find the gold. So it's all beginning to pull. The child in the dream, the female child in the dream, Keith, is that Carl Jung talks about the anima within each of our own psyches. It's that childlike feminine part of the psyche that is prepared to take risks, that is prepared to be playful, that is prepared to embrace life, to enjoy life, to savor life, to go and grab what life has without really worrying about the consequences. And that's why the dream has this girl child in it. Again, Paolo's using the metaphor of alchemy. So the moment he arrives in North Africa, guess what? He loses everything. He becomes destitute. All the money that he's saved up, he's lost. He's robbed in a marketplace. And within the space of less than a day, he actually hits rock bottom. Now, that rock bottom moment is somewhere, I'm sorry to say, in my experience, if you want to transform life, you are going to have to hit that rock bottom. And that's what happened to Santiago. So we can talk about that a bit, Keith, because I know you and I have had this conversation before. That rock bottom moment can be something that we can control, or it can control us. I know which I would rather do. I don't know about you, Keith, but I would rather choose to go into that place of darkness, that place of destitution, where the soul feels stripped and laid bare, and all the previous masks that we wear, all the previous illusions of the ego that we've lived in, they're going to be stripped away. Now, life will do this for most people at some point, regardless. But when it happens involuntarily, in my experience, it's tough. I mean, it's super tough, and it can lead to all kinds of mistakes. We can go charging off, trying to avoid the pain of those moments. We can get into all kinds of abuse, and we can get into all kinds of stuff that's really bad for us. You don't need me to tell you what they can be. But so what I did when I was 18 years old, fortunately, is I actually chose to visit that dark place because I personally was not happy with my own behavior. And what I discovered, and many people who go down a religious path of one from another, the more you try to be good, the harder it is. The more you try to be positive, the more negativity rises up within you. The more you try and be really nice to people, suddenly, out of the blue, you snap and you start being destructive and manipulative and not really the person that you're trying to be. Well, that was me. That summed me up to a T. So one of the reasons I decided to go and do what is called in old Catholic tradition is into the dark night of the soul, is that I wanted love to be there with me when I was doing it. So I used to go out every lunchtime. I took a year off. I was a high school teacher, and I actually took a year out. And I got help, and I strongly recommend you get some help if you decide you're going to go down this route. But I actually got help. There's this guy here called Keith. Here's a guy who can help. So don't ever hesitate to call Keith, all right? Contact Keith because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I voluntarily went into the dark night of the soul. I allowed the pain and the wounds of my childhood, of my early life to resurrect. Only this time, instead of just feeling the pain of that, I allowed love to embrace the wounds. And it took a year, but I actually got to the point where I could see no point to my life whatsoever. I couldn't see a reason to get up in the morning. I couldn't even think why I was here on God's earth. No reason whatsoever. Ironically, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the point that you can begin to discover your real treasure. Isn't that ironic? The point of no hope, the point of almost no return, when all seems lost, in my experience, in the teaching of alchemy, is where your real life has just begun.
That's where the door opens, isn't it?
That's where the door opens. Keith, I mean, how old were you when that first happened to you, for example? I don't want to be on my own here. I'm looking. See, I'm feeling.
I moved here at the age of 24. August 13th. Next month's going to be 32 years. Let's see, quick calculations. I was 28 years old when this went down for me.
Okay.
And I found myself in nothing. I found something in the nothing. And the nothing was the despair. It was the dark night of the soul. And when I couldn't go any further down, there was, ironically, this beautiful net still sustaining me. And when I realized that, I said, oh, y'all better hold on to y'all britches. This guy's about to step out of himself. But yeah, it's the pain. The pain, I always say a diamond in a peanut butter jar is still a diamond. You may have peanut butter all over it, but the diamond is still valuable. And that's you. You are that diamond. You are that jewel. And if it takes to go through a whole bunch of peanut butter, you better get to licking.
I love that metaphor. That's great. So that is exactly what happened to me. Was it a major Kundalini moment for me? No. Was it the first time I'd ever really faced my true self? Yes. So what I discovered is in that darkest of places, there was this little voice. And there was this little person, the real Colm, and it was the Colm, the child. And he was pretty angry, Keith. You don't really want to meet him when he's in one of his angry moods. It's not pretty.
We have a lot in common.
And I spent unsuccessfully most of my life up to that point. I was in my mid-20s by this point, like you. I'd struggled unsuccessfully to tame him, to shut him up, to keep him quiet. And the more I did that, the more he just rose up. Now, if you're a reader of Carl Jung, if you're a student of Jungian philosophy and psychoanalysis, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. So I did become a student of Carl Jung. So I did begin to understand about the unconscious and the buried memories that Jung believes we all, whenever we're wounded, whether it's wounded even at conception, in our mother's womb, at birth, in our earliest childhood, in our teenage life, doesn't matter when it is, all of those wounds, quite often, we just push them down and we bury them in what's known as the shadow self. And the problem is that they intensify, they brew, in alchemy terms, they brew in that dark place of our unconscious. So by going and visiting them, we can rediscover them, we can invite love to help heal, and that's what I did. So I just let this wounded child start to have a conversation with love. I kind of backed away. I kind of took myself out of the picture almost, and boy, did he rant and rave. I mean, he had some stuff to say, man. I mean, it was just, only love could have put up with the anger and the pain and so on. Of course, the more he screamed, the more love just loved on him. And I also, in watching this happen, I was able to begin to join in with love and say, you mean this is okay for him to feel this? Yeah, absolutely, it's okay.
So you actually had the opportunity to disassociate from your own wounds to see yourself from a greater perspective, so you can administer and apply the same love as the alchemist or the creator or God, and therefore double push. And that's just brilliant.
I don't know any other way. So I was very fortunate. I was part of a group, and we were visited. The group were visited at the time by a guy called Dr. Frank Lake, and I've actually dedicated my book to Dr. Frank Lake, sadly passed now. But he was using what we called at the time primal therapy or rebirthing therapy. The only recent example I've seen of it is Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop program. If you've watched that on Netflix, you might have different opinions on it, but one of the things they did was they went to Hawaii, and they did the nearest thing I've seen in modern times, or I mean in the last 2 or 3 years, people engaging in that practice. What primal therapy or rebirthing enables you to do is to, in a controlled environment, and that's the key, it has to be in a controlled environment, you can revisit the experiences themselves. And what I discovered, something I had no clue about up until I did that therapy, was that my mother was undiagnosed epileptic. Now, I knew she was epileptic and at some point had been diagnosed, so my adult self knew these facts. But what my toddler self taught me, because I was reliving those experiences, that before she was diagnosed, when she had a fit coming on, and I was a toddler, two years old at the most, we were at home alone during the day. And when she knew that a fit was coming on, she would start to behave really strange. I mean, it was like I had no idea what was going on. She would push me into the cupboard under the stairs in the house. And it was only a really small house, so it was really claustrophobic. She would shut me in the cupboard to protect me from whatever was going on. And I would be listening, and I'd hear all this screaming and crashing and banging. And, it was just terrifying. I was scared to death. But I buried that experience. And then she would open the door and chastise me for playing a game, saying, oh, that's where you were hiding, you naughty boy, come on out. So I grew up, in a nutshell, really confused about what love was supposed to look like. One minute, the person who was nurturing and caring became this monster through no fault of her own. Obviously, I realized later. Fortunately, after a little while, she was diagnosed, she was put on medication, and life was not so bad. But the wound, the scar, the pain of that experience, the damage had been done. And sadly, she was never in a place to help me through that in my childhood. So it took my own efforts. But here's the thing. I had to take responsibility for my own pain. I could not blame her. I could not blame the doctors for not diagnosing her. I couldn't blame my father for not, protecting me from it. I couldn't blame anybody else. There was no blame to place. It was, but somebody's got to take responsibility for it. And that's our responsibility for our own pain. And the best thing we can do when we take responsibility for that pain is get help. There's nothing shameful in exposing the pain as long as we're prepared to get help. And there's all kinds of people who will come to our aid if we're prepared to put our hand up and say, you know what, I really need help with this. We see it with alcoholism, Alcoholics Anonymous, amazing thing, things that they do. Go there. If that's the problem, get help from those guys. But if there are other things, find a counselor, get that help. I'm not saying that alchemy is a substitute for getting everyday practical help. All that alchemy is a metaphor for you to be able to see the framework of what's going on. So in the darkness, the alchemists called that the black phase. They actually had a name for it. And don't forget, we're talking thousands of years ago. These guys knew this stuff. So they had the black phase, and that's where we get down to the real wounds. And then as you go from the black phase, you go into what's known as the white phase. In their laboratory, to get to the white phase, they would increase the heat on the crucible to melt down the final components of the lead or whatever material they were trying to reduce down. And in the story of the alchemist, after Santiago has reached that rock bottom point, he goes wandering through the town, and he goes up a hill, and he ends up at a place called the Crystal Shop. And the Crystal Shop in the story of the alchemist is the beginning of his white phase in alchemy. Because guess what? The first thing he does, he walks into the shop, he picks up a glass, crystal glass, beautiful crystal cut glass. It's dirty. It's been sat in the window. It's full of dust. It's got cobwebs on it. What does he do? He starts to clean the crystal. And that's the activity of the white phase. Once we know who our true self is, who the wounded child is, in my case, then you can allow the love of the universe to begin to refine that, to purify that, and to turn it into the most valuable possession that we are ever going to own. He says to the guy who owns the shop, look, if I keep cleaning the stuff in the window, will you give me a meal? Because I've got no money. I'm going to starve tonight unless you feed me. And the guy says, oh, yeah, no, I don't think so. But as he says that, two customers come in. And for the first time in weeks, the crystal merchant actually sells some of his merchandise. So he says, okay, all right, you can stay. Well, he ends up staying nearly a year. And he turns the shop into this amazing, profitable, it's the most popular cafe in the end, in the whole of the town there in North Africa. And the whole point of that is that the time we are prepared to spend allowing love to refine, to cleanse, to purify, not to get rid of dirt in that sense, but to actually refine, to concentrate who our true self really is, then we will become clearer, we'll become more assured, we'll become more empowered. We'll actually know, we'll be able to see much more clearly the way ahead for the rest of our life. So there comes a point when the shepherd boy, Santiago, says, well, I've got enough money, I've made enough money now. I think I'm just going to go back to being a shepherd. I think I've kind of done my thing here. Enough's enough. I've done a load of hard work. I've been through the black phase. I've been through the white phase. I've got this far, and I'm still in one piece. So count your blessings. I'm still here. I think I'll just give it a break, and I'll go back to being a shepherd. I've got enough money to buy twice as many sheep that I had before. And then his heart says this, yeah, but have you actually really found your treasure yet? Have you gone to the pyramids? No. And ironically, what the merchant in the crystal shop says, well, there's a camel train just down the road. You're not really that far, and you've got enough money to get there. You could buy yourself a passage on the camel train. Why don't you give it a try? So more out of curiosity than anything else, he decides to keep going. So that's the end of the white phase. And then he gets on the camel train and he meets this guy called the Englishman. Now, here's a really interesting character. The Englishman is the person who introduces Santiago to the written work of alchemy. You can read it in there. He's got the books. So this guy on the camel train, who's from England, has got the books, and he's got books about how to produce the elixir of life, how you can make your own philosopher's stone, how to turn lead into gold, what the ingredients are, what the processes are. It's all very, very booky and complicated and academic and boring. And Santiago is scratching his head going, well, you know what? I don't think this is for me. I just, for some reason, it's not resonating for me. So he starts talking to another character called the camel driver. And a camel driver says, oh, well, in Arabia, in the desert where I come from, we don't need books to tell us what the universe is all about. We just listen to the desert and we look at the stars, and we can find the truth in a grain of sand. And the camels, we can listen to the language of the world, and it's all enveloped in this thing called the soul of the world. So he begins to learn a language of alchemy that is not the European alchemy. So we're not what Santiago makes a decision, and this is one of Paulo's major points, by the way, in his story, is that the alchemy and the power that Paulo has found, that he's portraying in this story, is not the booky academic stuff of European alchemy. It's the Arabian intuitive alchemy that he's encouraging us to go on. And guess what? One of the third most popular countries where all of Paulo's books are adored are all in the Middle East. So he's massively popular in Iraq, Iran, all across the Middle East, because they already know some of this stuff. So yeah. It resonates. I was in an Uber taxi. I didn't want to put an advert in. If people don't approve of Uber,
you're fine.
Forgive me. I did used to use Uber. I'm not using Uber anymore, but I did used to use Uber. And a lot of the guys in London, near where I live, come from the Middle East. And one of them turned to me and said one day, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I've just finished writing a book." He said, "Oh, really? What's the book?" I said, "It's called The Secret of the Alchemist." And he said, "The Alchemist? I've read that book. You mean The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, well, how do you know that book?" And I said, "Well, I published it in Australia." He pulled the Uber car over. This young guy was in such a state of shock. And he said, "Just say that again." I said, "I published the first book, The Alchemist, in Australia in 1993. And he said, "That book changed my life. And you published that book?" And I'm going, yeah. And I'm sitting in the back of his cab and I say, "Look, I've got a meeting I need to get to in about 10 minutes. Can we?" He said, No. He said, "What's going to be the name of your book? I've got, write it down for me. Write down the name of your book. I've got to read your book because I want to know what is the secret in this book that I read, The Alchemist." And we talked anyway. He dropped me off. And so that was my encounter with somebody from a completely different culture to mine, who had been touched by Paulo's book. So the character Santiago, he joins the camel train. He starts to learn about alchemy from the Arabic version, and they arrive at the oasis. Now, the oasis is a sort of a place of plenty. It's a place of refreshment. It's a place where you kind of arrive. And when you arrive at the oasis, you've probably kind of made it. It's a comfortable place. When you're in the desert and you're at an oasis, there's palm trees, there's dates, there's water, there's other people that you could meet with and talk to. You kind of just want to stay there. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, I really hate to tell you this, is the most dangerous spiritual place that you could ever. If you are in that place and you're feeling a bit cozy right now, just leaning back in your spiritual life, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, oh, yeah, I hear what this Colm guy is saying, and I hear what Keith keeps talking about all the time, how we're on a journey. Well, I'm a little bit tired of the journey, and I think I've done okay. I've arrived at a point where, I think I can just sort of rest now and not have to keep going. I was 40 years old, and that's when I met Paulo Coelho. I was at that oasis point in my life, and he came along and he tapped me on the shoulder. He was the alchemist in my life at the right moment. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, Colm, I've asked the universe to give you whatever you want so that you can actually achieve all of those things that you want, but you just need to decide what you want. I had given up my dreams. I'd stopped wanting to fulfill my dreams. And that's where so many of us reach that point. We can reach it in young life, early life. We can reach it in middle age. We can even reach it if you get to the ancient age that I am as well. But it's one of the most dangerous points in our entire spiritual journey is that temptation to just stop and to give up. Now, I'm not presuming anything here, but if that's where you are tonight in this particular stage, then I might just have the presumption to say that perhaps The Alchemist and my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, and Keith inviting me on this show tonight is an alchemy moment for you, where between us we're tapping you on the shoulder and we're saying it's time to head off for the pyramids, guys.
Everyone, Keith Anthony Blanchard here, Sin of Light Radio. Today I'm speaking with Colm Holland. We're speaking about his phenomenal bestseller called The Secret of the Alchemist. I had a Paulo in my life. In fact, he tapped me literally on my shoulder and says,
tell us.
I don't expect you to believe a word I'm telling you, Keith.
Oh, please
put it
tell
into
us.
application and watch what happens. That day, that week, that month, that year, my life turned within itself and became this exponential miracle. It just wouldn't stop. Things just kept happening as they are now. What would be the purpose of someone revisiting those wounds? Someone may say, I got my life together. I'm pretty good right now. What's the purpose of going back into the dungeon just to go hang out with something that, life is good. What can they benefit from doing such things?
There is a dimension of the spiritual journey that, if that's what you're thinking, the probability is that you've not entered that final dimension. Now, Keith, I have to say that I've talked to a lot of people and I've done quite a few podcasts, and I don't mention this very often. So I think your audience is the right kind of audience for us to talk about this. But let me just tell everybody this. There is another dimension of life that if you've not entered into it, then you are missing out. It's a dimension of life where you realize for the first time that you are part of the soul of the world. You are part of the creative process of the universe. You are part of the work of unconditional love. And when you dedicate yourself to that, the magic, as Keith just said, the miracles, the dimension of life that you enter into will literally, to use an old hippie phrase, it will blow your mind. I'm an old hippie, except my hair's a lot shorter, not like yours, Keith. I'm sure yours is much longer than mine. But that dimension of life, I would say, even people who are on the spiritual journey, people who are doing devoted meditation work, doing yoga, doing all kinds of practices, if you don't know day-to-day miracles, bang, 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 stuff happening that benefits your life and benefits those around you and benefits the world which you live in, so that you can become the alchemist in your world, then the thing that's stopping that from happening are those unhealed wounds that Keith just mentioned. They are obstacles of the soul. They become blocks to you entering in to what Paulo talks about in The Alchemist, your real treasure. Now, I have a name for this dimension of life. I actually call it true empowerment. True empowerment is where you are able to perform miracles. And we're going to talk about that just in a moment, because it's all right here in the original book, The Alchemist. That ability to perform miracles where you can actually alter and manifest a different outcome from the one that would have happened. Now, a lot of people would say, okay, you guys, you've really gone beyond now. So
We sure have.
you know, you were sounding credible. You know, you had me there for a minute. You kind of got me hooked in there, and I was right with you guys. But now you've gone beyond. What do you mean? You could actually manifest something different. I'm not kidding. So if you don't know that in your life, if you've not seen circumstances change, if you've not seen the ability to literally move a mountain from here to here, then I would say you still have obstacles and wounds.
Sure, because people think, Colm, they think that this is all metaphorical to move a mountain. We're here to tell you, no, it's not. Because once you get a small glimmer, a small glimpse of that space that my guest Colm Holland is talking about, you become a God junkie. You become a cosmic junkie. You can't get enough smack into your system. You can't. You just starve for it. You crave for it, and you will win your soul for it. You won't sell your soul for it. You'll win your soul for it. That place is infinite potential. And once you get a glimpse of that, things begin to align in such a way, things you never thought that would just simply happen, and how they happen, and to the level and the depth they happen. This stuff begins to level you, literally. You begin to level up. Yeah? Would you say that would be a good description, sir?
I wish I could say things the way you say them, Keith. I love your language. Yeah, what are we saying here? Yes, absolutely. That is what you've made my... Oh, Keith, I don't know what you did there, man, but you just made my light flicker like crazy. That's never happened before. Okay. We've got some wavelength going on here. This is just one of those moments. All right, we're in a sacred space. Let's just take a few seconds here a minute. Okay, so what we're talking about, folks, is really sacred here, and there are people listening right now who this is for you. So take it. There is a place of the soul that you've hidden that is dark, that right now unconditional love wants to come and just illuminate and heal with all the tenderness, with all the softness of true acceptance. And that's for you. So whoever you are, just take this moment, because that is for you. Thank you, Keith. Okay, so this is the thing, guys. The final wound that most of us fail to deal with is fear. I don't know what fear looks like for you. It's going to be different to my fear. All our fears are unique because we've all had different experiences. But there is one thing that fear will stop us from doing, and that is taking risks. The universe says, risk, 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 do it, go there. That dream that you've buried, that desire that you've completely thrown away and thought was of no value whatsoever, seize it, take it. Let love, this is what it's saying, let me, love, take your wound, let me heal that, and you will see that that is going to turn into the greatest courage that you never even dreamt you possessed. The one thing about warriors of light is that they are the most courageous, they are the biggest risk takers on the planet. Am I right, Keith? Yes, he's nodding for those of you.
Yeah, in short, I had that very experience. I became a warrior many years ago when I was just someone getting his head cut off. I was a kid. I was at a public swimming pool, and all of my friends are jumping off the high diving board. And I'm clinging to the side of the pool going, how in the world Are they doing this thing repeatedly when it's something that I am so scared to death? And finally, this dialogue inside just, I had enough. I said, today's today. So I get up that diving board. Now, all these bouncing little children are behind me, so I can't get out of line because I'm halfway up the diving board. There's no way down. I have to go. So 1, 2, 3, and I stop at the end of the board. Come on, Keith. Come on, Keith. Do it. Jump. Literally, metaphorically, for this great thing that we all have to achieve to get to this place that Colm is describing. Come on, Keith, jump. And I said, oh, shit. 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I hit the water, the first thing that happened was I realized I didn't die. And now I'm pushing people out the way to get back up the board. So I became a warrior. It gave me profound courage. It sure did.
So that is a wonderful metaphor. I've heard Will Smith say something different about skydiving, similar rather, about skydiving. One of the things that he says in a very similar situation to yours, and he calls himself an alchemist, by the way. He read the Alchemist years ago, and he calls himself an alchemist. One of the things that Will Smith said is that he was more scared when he was sitting on the bed in the morning knowing that he was going to be skydiving than when he actually stood on the edge of the plane ready to jump off. The fear in his room was more palpable than when he was there. And when he actually got there, he realized that most of us spend our lives in fear we don't ever even need to embrace. And why do we do that then? Why do we cling to those fears? Well, those fears protect us from the wounds that we are unwilling to expose. So the greatest treasure that we can all possess, that Keith's just described, is that true empowerment to be able to manifest an outcome in our life as if we are the alchemist that will change the world around us for the better and for good. And so that, in answering your question, Keith, that you asked several minutes ago, that's the reason why we do need to revisit those wounds, because without the healing of those wounds, without going through the pain and allowing that to happen, we are just missing out. We are just not entering into all that our life has for us. So here's the thing about destiny. Let's just talk about destiny. And those of you who know about Paulo Coelho and have studied his work, it's been called the personal legend. So why does he call it a legend rather than destiny? And that's for a reason. Destiny is normally associated with fate. And one of the biggest lies that even in the very first chapter of the book, The Alchemist, there's a character called Melchizedek. It's through Melchizedek that the boy Santiago encounters love for the first time. He realizes there is a power greater than himself. So Melchizedek reveals that power to him. And one of the things that Melchizedek says, yeah, I know that book that you're reading, Santiago, in the marketplace there. It's a book that contains the greatest lie that mankind ever tells to each other. And that is, it's the lie that we have no control over our own lives. That our life is somehow dictated by fate or some other power, and that, we cannot be the captain of our own ship. We cannot be the master of our own soul. And that's a lie. And it's easy. One of the dangers, I do think that horoscopes are really useful, but if a horoscope becomes the master of your choices and your soul, then it's supplanted something that should not be supplanted. There's only one person who should be in charge of your soul, and that's you. You can own it. You can determine its direction. You can determine your fate, if you want to call it fate. I prefer to call it destiny. And what is that true destiny? Where is it going to take you? Well, it's going to take you to the place of your greatest treasure. It's going to take you to the pyramids. To get to the pyramids, however, there's a final phase that the alchemists talk about that you need to go through, and it's the red phase. So we've done black, we've done white, and we've done red. So in the alchemist laboratory, they've increased the heat. It's turned everything to black, and then it's turned everything to a crystalline white. And now, this is now going to give off a sort of a glow and the glow is red. Those of you who know anything about alchemy know there's some other colors like the peacock's tail and some other stuff, yellow and so on. We're not going to go into that. The key thing is that red stands for one thing, and that is action. There is no spiritual life without action. There is no empowerment without getting involved, getting out there when COVID-19 is all finished. Or if you follow the words of George Harrison in his song Inner Light, we don't even need to go out of the door or even look out of the window. We can know everything there is to know right here within. And the action actually does begin within. But it will lead us out into the world. And we are going to have to get our hands dirty. Now, let me tell you what happens in the story of the Alchemist. The shepherd boy is really cozy, he's comfy in the oasis, and he even helps the guys. I won't spoil the story for you. He helps the chiefs of the oasis to save themselves. He has a vision which they believe, and it saves the oasis. When he does this, he wanders off into the desert, and suddenly this character appears, the alchemist, on a black stallion with a hawk on his shoulder, with this amazingly terrifying sharp sword. And he meets Santiago and he says, "What are you doing here? Who said you could come here? Who said you could be the person who's going to see into the soul of the world?" And Santiago has now entered into his empowerment and said, "Well, this is who I am. And yes, I did do this. And yes, I am going to go, I do believe I can go and find my treasure." And the alchemist says, "Good, because I will help you get there. I will do the last stretch of the journey with you, and we are going to face a few more trials." The work of alchemy is often called the great work. And you notice the emphasis on the word work. So there is some work we have to do there. But it finishes when you know that you're sort of reaching the pinnacle of the alchemy work. It's called what I call the great test. And the great test that the alchemist puts Santiago through is they get captured again by bandits, because there's a big bandit war going on in the desert where they live. And the bandits capture them and take their treasure, because don't forget, Santiago's got some more money in his pocket at this point. And they take the gold of the alchemist, and they take the treasure. And he says, they say to the Santiago, "Look, we're going to kill you anyway, because you've seen us. You know who we are, and you know where we are. And we can't have you telling our enemies who we are and where we are. So we're going to kill you. Is there anything you've got to say before we do that?" And essentially, the alchemist says, "Well, yeah, actually, why don't you let this boy turn himself into the wind for entertainment purposes?" And the boy says, Santiago's going, "You kidding? You mean, you must be talking about another boy. Are you kidding? I don't know how to turn myself into the wind." "What do you mean I know how to turn myself into the wind?" He said, "Yeah, well, you're an alchemist. You know how to turn yourself into the wind." And he says, "Yeah, but why don't you turn yourself into the wind?" "I already know how to turn myself into the wind. You need to learn how to turn yourself into the wind." So what is this turning yourself into the wind thing? Well, Santiago hasn't got a clue. He has no idea how to do this. He's completely lost. He wanders into the desert and he starts calling on all the powers of the universe, because he doesn't know how else he's going to do it. So he talks to the wind, and he talks to the desert, and he talks to the sun, and he enters into this great sort of, if you like, invocation of all of the power of the universe. And he pleads with them. But more than pleads with them, he starts to convince them why they should help him. So he says to the desert, he says to the wind, "If you blow, then you can actually raise the sand of the desert, so I can actually look into the face of the sun, because I need to talk to the sun, because the sun, I believe, has got the answer." So the wind says, "Yeah, okay, all right." And he says, "The reason you need to do this is because I've got a power that you can help me enter into, which you don't have." And the wind says, "What power don't I have?" He says, "You don't have the power of love. You don't know how to love. but I can know how to love because I'm a human being. That's what I have to contribute to the universe. And the wind says, oh, I hadn't really thought of that before. That's really cool. Okay, I'll blow. So he blows and he covers the sun. And so Santiago then talks to the sun and said, son, you are the mighty sun. You're the man. I mean, you're it. You know, we're all here because you exist. But I believe I've got something that I can do that even you can't do. And that is I can bring love to all of my fellows on earth. You can give us life, but you can't give us love. And that's what I need to do. And he says, yeah, that's a good argument. So I'm going to introduce you to one more thing, and that is the hand that wrote all. So the Santiago is staring face to face into the power of love itself. And the prayer that he prays, this is really interesting, Keith, and it's one of the reasons I love the story of the Alchemist and what Paulo wrote in there, is that he doesn't actually ask love to do anything. Love actually gives him a new awareness, and the awareness is that as he looks, instead of at the sun and the hand that wrote all, he actually looks within, and he discovers that the love that he sees there in the universe actually exists in his own soul. And that he, to quote exactly from the book, and that he, a boy, has the power of love, the power of God, if you wish, in his own heart. And he, the boy, can perform miracles. And guess what? He becomes the wind. And the next thing we know, he appears on the other side of the camp. The camp's practically destroyed. The chieftain's scared out of his wits. He's never seen anything like this. And this is just a boy. Incredible. So he says, look, hey, this is real magic. You guys are the real thing. So here's some of your money back. We're going to keep most of it. But here's enough. Go on your way. We actually want you out of here because you guys are the real thing. And that's the point at which Santiago becomes an alchemist, where he realizes that he is an alchemist. And that's what my book, in a way, that's one of the reasons I wrote my book in the first place, is to enable us, those of us that have read the story of the Alchemist, to realize the real power that's being portrayed in this and how that's a reality in my own life. And if it's a reality in my life, I know it's a reality in Keith's life. If that's a reality in our lives, it can be a reality in everyone's life. There isn't anybody that should be missing out on this reality. So what is the metaphor of Santiago being turned into the wind? It's a rite of passage that happens when we fully commit to allow unconditional love to take over our life. It's that moment, when you made that decision, Keith, when you said, okay, there's lots of things I can do in my life. There's lots of things I can live for. There's lots of other people I could live for. There's ambitions of my own I could live for. There's all of these things, but do you know what? They actually all pale into insignificance compared to committing my life to live to further the cause of love, the cause of God, the cause of spirit, the cause of whatever name we give to that. And it's actually one of the most selfish but selfless things that we can ever do. Allowing myself to be embraced by love and committing myself to let love take me wherever it wants to take me is because you're kind of turning your back on lots of other things, other people, and in other. But in that selfish act, what happens is that we then become unconditional love to them. So if you think about your relationships, if you think about your career, if you think about your future, your job, your situation right now, a lot of that's all just been thrown up in the air, and the cards are getting restacked for many of us right now. This is an amazing opportunity.
It's the opportunity of forever.
Unbelievable. I mean, my heart and my prayers and sending love to everyone who's been affected by COVID-19 in all the different ways. most of us have been touched in some way, some worse than others. If you've lost loved ones, then we're right with you. And
God bless you.
bless you, our condolences. Don't wish that. I'm not wishing this situation, but it's here. We can't avoid it. It's come upon us for whatever reason. But the main reason as individuals is it's a moment to take stock and to think at this point in time, what am I going to do next? Where am I going? And it's not so much from a practical point of view, it's about an orientation point of view. It's an opportunity to reorientate our souls, to be in line with the universe, to be in line with unconditional love, and to embrace it and let it begin to work its magic in our lives. Keith, thank you so much for having me today, because I love you dearly. I so enjoy our conversation, but you wanted me to tell you what my book is about. That in the last hour and a half nearly, I've explained as best I can in my faltering words to explain what it is that I've written about. The book says it a lot better than I do, I have to say.
That was a beautiful soul massage for me, sir. Thank you. No joke, really, really. And your book is also available on audiobook. Is that right? Or is it coming out soon on audiobook? Or is that available now for those who, like to hear and drive?
Yeah, you can go to Google. You can go to Google Play. You can go to Apple. It's available in both. Yes, I have an audio version of the book. Some people prefer to listen to it than read it because you can do it while you're doing something else. So it's a good idea. The book itself and the ebook and Kindle version are coming out next Friday, almost a week tomorrow, exactly.
I'm going to post the links to my guest today, Colm Holland's books and everything he's about. From the chat room quickly before you go, sir, Melinda says she's going to take the time to pull that book out and kick the dust off of it and get back into it. My brother from Dallas, Texas, Robert Harrison, says, "Hi, Colm. I met Israel Regardi and a friend of Hans Nintzel in Dallas. Do you know these two people?"
No.
Obviously, knowing Robert, they're associated with Alchemy and things of the like.
Okay. No, I'm not part of any Alchemy Brotherhood. I've just hastened to other. I'm a lone maverick, I must confess.
Colm, thank you. Would you leave us with a closing thought? Anything that feels like it's going to fill you full of bliss or explode if you don't let it out. What would you like to share with our listening audience?
I'm going to share the opening sentences of my book.
Oh, come on.
So I say right at the very beginning, because this really sets the tone, I say this: the greatest challenge we face is to truly believe at the very core of our heart that we are loved unconditionally for who we are and not for what we can do.
Let me digest on that for a second. Nothing's broken. No one's judging, no one's bashing. All there is that's administered for eternity, not beyond this life, not beyond this life, before this life. It's never been anything else. Right.
Exactly.
Brother, thank you so much for joining me here on Center of Light Radio.
It's been more than a pleasure. It's been an experience. Thank you so much, Keith. You're a gem. Thank you for all the work you do for everyone listening. Please don't stop what you're doing.
I won't. Everyone, Keith Anthony Blanchard with my guest, Colm Holland, and we are speaking, or have been speaking about tonight, The Secret of the Alchemist. I had an outro. I'm learning this new technology. I got a lot of bells and whistles. So I will be seeing you soon. I'm doing lots of interviews now because of my soon-to-be release, Homecoming: Crossing the Bridge to the Soul. Everyone, please go walk all over Mr. Colm Holland's page. Let him know that you are moving about, and I will see you soon. Always remember, you are loved beyond measure. The light doesn't live in you. You are the light, nor were you ever created. You have always been and always will be. Think about that. Think about that. Don't think about that. Think about it. Feel it. Fall into it. Be it. Live it. The 1,000-year journey starts with one step. But in that one step, you have moved across 500 years. Because without that first step, nothing happens. Peace, love, and light.